mean, when you talk about the black community
Yeah,
and the history of it with religion, clearly Christianity was not in Africa
that's a fact.
originally.
That's a fact.
And when the Africans were brought over to America, the Christianity was forced onto them.
That's a fact.
And the black preacher actually became the first black upper class
That's a
because
fact.
the slave masters would use the black preacher to keep the other blacks in line.
You know your stuff, V.
A little bit,
I'm listening.
a little bit. So you kind of have somewhat of a backlash these days against the black church with certain people.
And rightfully so. But I'll explain this. When people tell me, look what Islam has done for the black man in America, you mean the innovative aspect of Islam. You couldn't mean actual Islam, conventional Islam. No, we're suffering from what's called an acculturation process. And this is when you conform to religious ideologies and the phenomena thereof in light of the fact that you're living in your diaspora or have been taken out of your indigenous environment and forced to adopt the lifestyles that you are immediately subject to. So if we identified the slave master as a Christian, it's just human nature to try to identify with a religion that seems to be in opposition to it. So Islam makes sense at that particular time
I see what you're
because
saying.
it appears that the Muslims are in conflict with the Christians. And if my slave master is Christian and I'm waking into a new consciousness, then let me go against Christianity by adopting Islam. So I don't believe that Islam is the black man's original religion. I mean, I know I can go into Nigeria and we can look up Allah and we can see that it's a female deity, a womb deity. And it makes sense because when the Muslims chant, A'udhu billahi minash shaitan rajim, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, when they say that, and we understand the trilateral root, the R, H, and M, then we are not seeking refuge in Allah's yielding ability and mercy from that thing of clay called Satan. We're seeking refuge by way of Allah's womb. Because if you ask anybody who speaks any Arabic, who's honest, and I'm not talking about black people who adopt religions and think they don't got to learn the language. You ask them about Rahim or Rahum. You ask them about the trilateral root, the R, the H, and the M, or the three-part verb. And you ask them, does it mean womb? And they say, yeah, but by womb, we mean you get your mercy through the womb symbolically. So that's why we made the word mercy. But if you ask, what does the word mean? Womb. So then you seeking refuge by way of Allah's womb, which make Allah what? A female, which is why they have a feminine rendition of it called Alat, right? But we'll move forward. If we go to the older cultural paradigm that pre-exists Islam, we're going to find that there's a Allah that is a female deity of the womb. But if man had to find out that his God was a woman, what would he do with his chauvinism? What would he do with his misogyny? His whole doctrine is out of here, and he would have to put the woman back where? On the throne. But we go into ancient Egypt. Isis or Aset, her name means what? Throne. And the only letter that's different from her name that makes up her husband's name, who would be a Jehovah of the Bible, is Osiris, but the only glyph that's different is the all-seeing eye, which is pronounced Ir, which means to make. So the woman's role was to make the throne for her man, which means we get our salvation through our women. And all the ancient black paradigms made subscriptions to identifying the woman as the most integral part of our existence. That's where we become gods. We are children of her, not the other way around. All this rib stuff and who was created first, it's cool. It caters to man's ego.
Right.
Okay? It caters to man's ego. But if we go into our original archetype of conception via Africa, we're going to see, no matter if you make Allah be the merciful, and then we see you mistranslating our mercy we get from Allah, and it's the womb from Allah, then like, if Allah got a womb, then what we going to do with that? You feel what I'm saying? I went to Egypt, and I went to the Coptic church, one of the oldest Christian sects in the world, and I got to see that cross. And I got it on my Instagram, and I give you the exact location of where to find it, all the information to look it up. And guess who's on the original cross called an Ankh? which means eternal life. It's a black woman with an afro. So what would we do if we found out that we got eternal life and our salvation through a black woman instead of the white man put on the cross? What would we do?
Right. I mean,
would we turn around and then say, hey, let's worship black women? Because no matter if I go to Islam, Judaism, or Christianity, when we see that even in the Vatican, they worship a black Madonna, no matter where we go, we keep seeing the worship of black women. If we look at a mosque, we want to call it a mosque, but we don't want to call it a nipple. We can go into Hebrew, the word El Shaddai, right? But if we understand that Hebrew has an ideographic and pictographic disposition, then we know each letter means and represents something. So we can look up Sheen, which looks like this. It represents teeth. Then you have Daleth, right? And Daleth represents what? So you said you have Sheen, Daleth, and you have Yod. When the Daleth and the Yod get together, it pronounces a long I sound. So you get Shaddai. So now we have Sheen, Daleth, and Yod. So Sheen represents teeth, and Daleth represents nipple or knob. And then you have Yod, which represents hand. And this is the word for what? The force that they translate. They translate it as the force, but it's one of the names of God in the Bible, in the Torah. They call him El Shaddai, right? So, and El means power, right? So the power from what or of what? Well, if they calling God El Shaddai, it's very interesting that they should call God El Shaddai. Because if we break it down based on Hebrew, ideographic and pictographic terminology, Sheen represents teeth, Daleth represents nipple or knob, and Yod represents the hand. So where do you see teeth on a nipple and a hand? Breastfeeding. So they identify God through the convention of breastfeeding. Why? Because you get something from your creator that you can't get from no one else. It's called colostrum fluid. Colostrum fluid is this yellow liquidy fluid that you get primarily inside the first 3 months of breastfeeding. And what it accounts for is the consciousness of the child. It enhances the immunity of the child. It enhances the digestive system of the child. And if your digestion was doing very good, but your intelligence or IQ was low, then that colostrum fluid, what it does, it equalizes it. It brings you up to standard. It's made exclusively for the child that it was made for. So we get something from our creator that we can't get from nobody else. Hence the reason why they would identify God as Shaddai and why they would build monuments that have breast shapes on top of it and call it mosque, but put a nipple on top because we was venerating the procreative abilities of the woman. But what would we do if we found out this was all true? We'd just go back to worshiping men. But you see, as a man, I worship women.
Yeah. Well, I mean, even when you talk about
the black woman is my God. That's who I worship. That's my God. She's the medium to which we come here on the physical planet. I'm not saying that she created all of this. I'm saying she's part of all of which we see created. To disrespect her is to desecrate the womb from which we derive. And to do so is going to bring on the burdens that we subject to today. We make our happy wife, happy life. That's what they say, right? You turn on these women and you're going to have hell. It's not a man's world.